Hello everyone, and welcome back to the new most controversial video that I'll ever probably make, at least until I talk about gold again. So today we're going to be talking about modding. I'll go over some general purpose stuff, but the main focus of this video is going to be the issues that I see with the current approval, verification, and sandbox categories that we have for mods. This video is going to be long, it's going to be messy, and I'm going to cover a lot of ground, but a couple of things I want to get out into the open before anything else, just to be absolutely clear. Just because you use approved mods doesn't mean you're cheating, or using them to cheat, or even trying to in any capacity. Just because someone makes an approved mod that could potentially give an advantage to a player doesn't mean they're designing that mod to be a cheat. Bottom line is, I really don't take any issues with mod makers, except on some rare occasions, which we'll talk about, and mod users at all. My issue is with the approval system and how it's currently implemented. And before we even get into anything, I would like to apologize to the modding community at large, that I've never really been clear in my statements whenever I said that there was a lot of mods that were able to be used for cheating. I should have taken the time to break it down sooner, be more clear about my points, and really articulate things instead of throwing the blanket label of cheating at so many talented and passionate individuals. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the approval categories that we currently have for mods in Deep Rock Galactic. We have verified, which is largely quality of life and audio-video mods that do not affect clients in the game. Basically, you can join someone else's game while using these mods and they won't even be able to tell, because it doesn't affect gameplay and it doesn't have to send any information to the host's computer. Then we have approved and sandbox. I'm going to read these definitions verbatim as the wording is very important. Approved for progression mods are challenging or alternate game modes, changes to weapon stats, and mods that moderately alter gameplay elements while still retaining progression in line with a regular game. And sandbox mods are any mod that changes rewards or mission payout, and mods that directly unlock in-game items. Notice some key words in the approved definition: altering or challenging game modes, changes to weapon stats, and mods that moderately alter gameplay elements while still retaining progression. And sandbox specifically states any mod that changes rewards. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop over to Mod.io and look at a few standout mods. Once again, any mod that I display in this video, unless explicitly stated, is not something that I'm going to accuse anyone of making or using for the purpose of cheating. I just want to outline the possibility of them being used that way and the way that the approval system fails in its current iteration. One specific thing I need to clear up before we actually get into the first couple of mods is that the Hazard 6 and Starship Trooper Elite mods that I display in this video don't actually operate anymore. They are not updated to the current version of the game. However, this isn't because they were removed or addressed in the way that I would have liked them to be, which is acknowledging that they shouldn't be approved and should be in sandbox. Due to the increased payout reward, it happened because they were not updated to the current iteration of the game, and had they been, they would likely still be in popular demand and use right now. So I don't actually say that while we're going through the mods individually, but I just wanted to make it clear that these two that I display don't actually work anymore. First we have Starship Troopers Elite. This is a difficulty mod that makes a lot more bugs spawn. Having played with it a few times myself, I can definitely say that it's a lot of legwork to keep up with all these bugs. And you also need to have a higher enemy cap to even be able to fit them all in the game. Now, I'm not going to disagree and say that this mod does not make the game harder. And theoretically, if you're playing a harder version of each mission, you should be given a higher reward, correct? Well, that's one of the things that this mod does, is it increases the amount of XP you get from what would be Hazard 5 at 133% to 150% in this mod. And while having played this mod myself, I can say that the amount of work that you're putting in definitely equates to that. That's not a decision that we as players and mod makers get to make, and is explicitly outlined in the sandbox mod criteria that if it modifies payout in any way, it should be a sandbox mod. But at this moment in time, this is an approved mod. So at this point, we've already thrown the criteria for sandbox versus approved mods out the window. And this is one of the more rationally balanced and reasonable mods that I've seen. Next we have Hazard 6. This is a staple mod. It's more or less the same as Starship Troopers Elite in that it makes Hazard 5 replaced with a harder difficulty. So I'm not going to go through all the exact details, as there's some slight differences in what makes it harder versus Starship Troopers, but once again we see that they're the leading factor that I take issue with is it alters the reward for these missions from 133% to 166%. And this is where, even if we ignore the fact that this automatically defines this mod as a sandbox mod, it also begs to question why this mod is deemed 166%, whereas Starship Troopers Elite is deemed 150%. Who gets to make that decision other than the mod maker, and who finds it justifiable? And the issue isn't inherently that it's 150% or 166%, it's that tomorrow someone could come along and make a Hazard 7 mod and set the value to 200%. And at that point, who's to tell them they're wrong to do so, because we've already justified that slightly harder than Hazard 5 is worth either 150 or 166%, so if we go another rung up the ladder, why shouldn't the reward continue to increase? And even if the difficulty does proportionally increase to match the increased reward, we're still in contrast to that initial criteria, which deems it a sandbox mod, and as we can see, Hazard 6 is also approved. Once again, I don't think Hazard 6 is used to cheat, but the potential is there, and the fact that the base rules that are set out and outlined are instantly violated by the reward multiplier mechanic, it just doesn't sit right with me, and it opens the door for a lot of the other things that we're going to talk about later on. Next we have Swarm Control, or Swarm Size Control as it used to be called. Basically this one allows you to manually adjust how many of each type of enemy are spawning, their statistics, speed, projectile speed, health. It gives you a very great deal of control over the enemies that you're fighting. And this is compatible with all the higher difficulties, so you can increase the amount of enemies you're fighting on Hazard 6, or increase the amount of enemies you're fighting on Hazard 5. But the problem with this mod is that it also allows you to reduce the amount of enemies that you're fighting very heavily, down to 5% of the normal values. On its own, this is fine. I've used this mod to capture ambient footage for the intros to my videos. Whenever I'm in a cave, I use this mod to reduce the amount of enemies that are there so I can get clean footage. However, I shouldn't be able to finish those missions and get rewarded for them when there's no enemies present. That's not something I should be able to do, because that is, by most people's definition, altering gameplay elements and making progression much, much easier. Maybe I'm misinterpreting the definition of an approved mod, but when I hear the words retaining progression, I think that you actually have to play through the normal flow of every mission, and you have to engage with the normal gameplay elements, and removing enemies from the game down to 5% of their normal values is a very significant change in progression and more than a moderate altering to gameplay elements. And I don't think that most people, 99% of people using this mod, are probably increasing the values. They're using it to make the game harder, like the intention is. But once again, we have to figure out where this falls into that definition. This one's not as cut and dry as the previous two mods that blatantly fall into the category of sandbox, but I mean, when we're talking about removing 95% of the enemies from every mission that you play forever, and you can use it on those higher difficulties and get a higher payout, that seems a little off. And really the crux of a lot of these mods is the things that you can combine them with. And that is a large issue as well that I can't think of a great way to address, is just the fact that you can have these mods that make the game easier, that are designed for use on the higher difficulties, but they don't require you to play the higher difficulties. You can just use them in Hazard 3 if you want to. And once again, I don't think most people are using this mod to cheat. I think they're using it to make the game significantly harder. I've been victim of playing with other people. I've been a victim of this mod many, many times. So I can definitely attest to the fact that it does what it's designed to do, but the fact that it has the ability, it has sandbox features in it, is a bit off to me. And next, we have one of those mods that I was talking about that's intended for use on higher difficulties. 40 Nitro Resupply pods. Does what it says on the box. Instead of 80 Nitro, you need 40 Nitro. On higher difficulties, like Starship Troopers or using Swarm Size Control to fight 3 times as many bugs, these are damn near required. You can realistically do those missions without it, but you're not going to have a good time. Obviously, this mod is heavily being used for modded difficulties, but as you can see, there's no requirement to use it on modded difficulties. There's nothing stopping me right now from grabbing this mod and just using it for as long as I see fit. And once I'm at the point where I've won as many much easier missions as I want, I can simply uninstall the mod and go back to playing like a vanilla player. So, like I said, this really isn't egregious on its own because of the intention, and I know the people that made this mod didn't intend for it to just be like, oh, make base game easier. But I can guarantee you there's at least a few people using it that way. Now we're starting to get into some of the more egregious mods. This is very slight Bosco improvements. People are very fond of naming the mods very slight or small. In reality, it's significant buffs. So, I mean, you could pause and look at this if you want. It's literally just a buff to every stat. It gives you twice as many revives. Like, this was one of the lower end ones that I just wanted to feature to get an idea of what these look like. But, I mean, realistically, how much further can you go before it's just doubling all the stats and it's just a free mod that makes the game easier? Don't really have much to say about this other than it's one of the less egregious approved mods I've seen. Now here's one I've really wanted to talk about for a while. This is Brighter Objects, and I'm gonna actually harp on this one a lot harder because I use this myself. I want to make that incredibly clear. I use this mod basically every time that I play now. I'm not part of the problem that I'm talking about with people using mods to make the game easier for themselves, and whether or not that's justified and falls into approval categories. But this is a really hard one to quantify because it is a visual change. It's an audio-visual change that only affects the people who have it installed. However, it does make the game easier because the tagline of Deep Rock Galactic being Danger, Darkness, Dwarves, when damn near everything that you need in the mission glows, that darkness component matters a lot less. I have no issue finding things even without this mod personally, just because I know how the caves work, and I'm sure there's this same kind of line of logic for other mods that are approved or potentially give you an advantage as well, but that doesn't mean it's not wrong for me to use it. It is an advantage that I'm obtaining from a mod on my normal save file. And more, potentially even more egregious than the other mods we've talked about, this is verified. This does not require anyone else to see that you have it. You can use it for as long as you want and never have to go on modded status. So, like, realistically, this is the first crack in the verified system. We now have an advantage that is a verified mod. Theoretically, everyone should have this, because why wouldn't you? Well, if you value playing the game legitimately and not making it easier for yourself with mods, you shouldn't have it. So like I said, I'm not immune to the field that I'm criticizing here. It is very plainly applicable to me as well. That's why I'm saying I don't have a huge issue with the people who use these mods. It's about the approval system and allowing this to even be verified in the first place. I'd be lying if I didn't say that half the reason I even use this mod is in hopes to someday get some attention from the developers and say, hey, this guy is consistently using this thing that makes the game easier. Why would he be doing that if it's a verified mod? So, just some food for thought on that. And also, I wanted to show that I'm not... well, I guess I am a hypocrite, and I want to acknowledge that I am. And then we have the second Brighter Object mod, which this one's very interesting because this passes on the Brighter Object power to Gold, Dystrum, and Nitro. This one's approved. And the logic that was provided to the mod maker on this from the developers was that these don't normally have lighting to them. And I think that's a real cop-out excuse whenever you're putting it in the category with doubling the stats of all of your equipment and things like that. It really... I'm not saying it should be verified. I think normal Brighter Objects should be approved with this one. But the fact that they have normal Brighter Objects in verified and this one in approved is a really weird line in the sand to draw, considering more or less they do the same thing. But as we're gonna see later on, approved mods that should be in Sandbox are also on the wrong side of that line. So now we'll get over to the really weird stuff. More rare enemy encounters. So there used to be a version of this that increased it to 100% that was approved for a while before it finally got kicked back to sandbox, but basically this is exactly what it says on the tin. You get a core lock at a much higher rate, and you get a Betsy at a much higher rate, 4 times as often for both of them. I don't know about you, but I consider Betsy more of an asset than a threat, considering how quickly you can shut her down with most classes, and core locks have value. Yes, they do take effort to kill, but they have value. So, in my and many other people's opinion, a core lock is a good thing. It's value. It gives you more experience and credits. So, would that not count as changing the rewards or mission payout because you had greater chances to get an event that made the mission pay out more? The Betsy one is less impactful because it's only applicable to that one mission, but still, at that, it gives you another asset to make the mission easier for yourself. If it was just Betsy, it would be a little less egregious, but having the payout and the Betsy here as well, that and this mod used to include crassus detonators, but it would have been sandbox. The original mod maker was threatened with it being put in sandbox if he didn't remove the crassus, which once again is what I'm talking about, which is this weird line in the sand that's being drawn. Why is a core lock different than a crassus? Is it because the core lock doesn't give you gold directly, it gives you gold in the end screen? I'd rather have a core lock than a crassus detonator because it's much easier to deal with. It has about the same amount of health if you combine all the sprouts versus straight up killing a crassus, and you don't have to mine all the gold, you just put the chunks in. So if anything, they should have left the crassus and taken the core lock out. So you see what I'm saying? It's a weird line in the sand to draw that the crassus detonator is this holy grail that can't be included in approved mods, but even then it is. We'll get to that in a minute. Whereas core locks are somehow different. Alright, now we're getting to the real egregious shit. I'm only going to show off 2 of these because there's an absolute ton of them, and we'd be here all day trying to parse apart all the different random stat increases and blanket buffs to everything. But, like I said, the verbiage of the adjective of slightly is very poorly used in this scenario, because basically every piece of equipment that you can use, everything that works in your favor, is buffed in one way or another. Maybe I need to reread this list, but there is no nerfs here. If there is a single nerf to any of this, I don't see it. More damage, more ammo, or more clip size, more damage, more ammo, like, I mean, where do we draw the line here? So, like, really, like, this, once again, the implication here is it's intended to be used in conjunction with mods that make the game harder, but it's not required. You don't have to play the higher difficulty mods, and at that, this is where we start to get to the territory where I want to ask this individual, why are you playing a higher difficulty if you need to make all of your equipment better to play it? Why not just play either a lower modded difficulty or vanilla game with normal upgrades? And it's not like this is a rare thing. This is used by this is very frequently subscribed and very popular, as you can see. So I can guarantee at least a few individuals are not using this for modded difficulties. And also, there's plenty of people playing modded difficulties without this. And the last one we'll go over has one of my favorite changes of all time. At least this one's a little bit more publicly disliked, just because it's absolutely absurd to the degree at which it changes things. But we'll look at it anyways. It's basically the same as the last one we looked at. It's just way more shameless, in that it increases the power of the flashlight, flares, it gives you, I think, nearly twice as much health. No, only 185 health. It allows your health to regenerate all the way up to 100%. Reduces fall damage, removes friendly fire, makes everything dig more quickly, and then this is the real kicker that I love. The walking speed is increased to higher than the base game run speed. So you can literally just press W and move faster than a vanilla player can while sprinting. And if we want to talk about sprinting, holy hell. Like this person doesn't even try to justify it as like this is for modded difficulties. No, it's a minor amount of tweaks to make life easier. I mean, at what point do we call it what it is, which is just cheating? Next we have game tools. This is a really good mod made by one of the OG and one of the best mod makers, so once again, I'm really not trying to direct any hate or flack at him, because what this mod is intended for is supporting things like Twitch spawns and allowing us to test things in the sandbox environment, but we're able to spawn crassus detonators with this mod, like we talked about with the more rare events mod that was threatened with sandboxing because it was able to increase the chances of a crassus detonator 25%. This mod will allow you to spawn an infinite amount, at a whim, as many as you want, as well as things like loot bugs, so you have an indefinite amount of nitro. You can just sit in a cave and farm crassus detonators all day. Do I think that's what this mod was designed for? Of course not. Of course it wasn't. This is a tool, like it says, game tools made for the community, and I use this frequently for testing things and testing builds and finding out little gameplay mechanical stuff whenever someone asks me, can I temp shock Betsy? I don't know the answer to that off the cuff. I load up this mod and I test it out. And if I didn't have this mod, I'd be very frustrated. But that's the thing I'm getting at here is, this mod shouldn't be approved because it gives you an advantage. It significantly changes the gameplay loop. Was it designed to be used every mission and used to spawn loot bugs when you're low on nitro? No, of course not. But it has the capability to do that. So it really doesn't fall into approved because it moderately alters the gameplay elements, and it also technically falls into sandbox because you can significantly modify the payout of your missions by spawning crassus detonators and then spawning bulk detonators to blow up the gold. Like, is that harder than just installing cheat engine? Absolutely, but for some people it's gonna be what they do. And I think it's very telling that in the comments of this mod you see an individual looking for a way to spawn a huli hoarder, which I think we can all understand the reasoning behind why they would want that, as the only thing that you aren't able to get spawned from this menu is huli hoarders. And this individual clearly needs some minerals to make some upgrades, so they come to an approved mod to find them. Which, this gives me at least some confirmation that there's at least a few of these people out there. And even if there is only a few of them, and even if there's none of them, it still goes back to what we said in the beginning, which is, this just isn't in the right approval category based on what the approval categories are outlined as. I know that was a lot of information coming at you for a prolonged period of time, so let's simplify things for a little bit and hop into the game and look at just how broken some of these mods can be in practice. So we're going to start with 2, just to show what you can do with just a couple of mods that unfortunately synergize well with each other. So we're going to take game tools and swarm control. And like we looked at before, we have the 5% modifiers from swarm control, and then we're just going to open the spawn menu, go to the spawn list, and I think we'll take 10 crassus detonators. And unsurprisingly, it dies very easily whenever it has 5% of its normal health. And there's no repercussion. There's just... we just keep doing this. Now there's actually 10. So these incredibly weak crassus detonators will just die off. And as they die off, they're just gonna mine their own gold. And as you can see, in about 45 seconds, we have invented a money printer. And once again, this isn't the fault of these mods for existing, or the mod makers for making them, because this could be a really cool, like, YouTube intro for me, like, literally just making a golden cave. Be like, this is my own personal hell, because I don't like gold, but as you can see, this is normal. I can finish this mission, go back and disable these mods, and just return to playing the game normally. Like, I can get out of here with these spoils and not suffer any repercussions or this have to be a sandbox save or anything like that. Oh, and I forgot, I also am nearly immune to all of their attacks because their health or their damage has been reduced. Not the death explosion though. That's still very, very real. But as you can see, this is like, I believe the tool should exist, but not in the capacity that it's not majorly changing the progression, which is what approved mods aren't supposed to be. So after all this doom and gloom, you're probably wondering what can actually be done to fix this situation, because most of these mods that I'm using to break the game this way, I don't want them to be sent to Sandbox. It's just a matter of the current iteration of the approval system, they should be in Sandbox. So once again, I think the issue comes down to the way the approval system currently works and is being moderated, not with the mods that are being made. And this might seem a little extreme to some, but I would entirely remove the Sandbox category, and instead of approved mods, you just have non-gameplay changing mods, and what we have currently is verified, and then it would have a separate save for approved mods. At any point in time, you would obviously be able to copy the vanilla save over to use mods on it, and the only real meaningful difference would be the existence of Steam achievements. And personally, I really wouldn't care if Steam achievements were enabled on the modded save file. There's really no achievement in Deep Rock Galactic that's actually difficult. Yes, all gold promotion does take hundreds of hours, and you could cheat it with mods and get it done in a weekend. As far as the Steam achievement argument goes, I really don't care if the Steam achievements are enabled on the modded save file, because, like I said, really none of them are actually challenging. And at that point, really the only meaningful difference we have left is the modded player tag and the difficulty of finding modded players. And I think the difficulty of finding modded players argument is very, very valid. Having played public games with approved mods and getting maybe 1 or 2 people joining me in an hour of gameplay, it's very telling that playing in public lobbies with mods has this very stark contrast in that nobody is looking for those random modded games. So I think that is a very significant issue that needs to be addressed if the approval system is going to get reworked. And while I think that jumping feet first and just completely removing the approval category and just having cosmetic mods and gameplay mods as the 2 and only 2 modes of play, I think it would help push more people into playing in the modded category. And then the real big ticket item that I'm probably going to get a lot of comments about is, why do you even care? Why does level even matter? Why shouldn't people be able to cheat or get a slight advantage or make the game easier for themselves? And while I don't really have a great answer for you, just by looking at my channel and looking at my profile and looking at my Twitch, I've spent a lot of time and invested a lot of energy, and I've been actively playing it and following it through its development for over 3 years now. So I'd be lying if I didn't say that I at least have a little bit of investment in the game being balanced and understanding the progression, and something that I've spent so much time on, I actually want to call things out when they don't seem correct to me. And yeah, at the end of the day, it is a PvE game, and there really is nothing that you can do to harm other players by cheating some gold in your own game. And that's why I've sort of accepted at this point. That's why I use brighter objects. It's just to say, hey, I'm part of the problem now, and it really doesn't matter, and I'm not hurting anyone. But I think I can still call out the fact that the approval system in its current iteration is enabling cheating. And it really makes me question why they force people into approved and sandbox saves and disable Steam achievements when you can just turn off the approved mods afterwards and get those Steam achievements anyways. That, and there's very few sandbox mods that are actually extreme cheats. Someone made a mod where you could purchase barley bulbs for 10,000 credits, which is definitely an extreme price, and it got kicked to sandbox. I mean, that's one of the more balanced approved mods I can imagine. So this is what I'm talking about, is just in the current iteration, it's impossible to ever keep anything fair when we're talking about balancing all of these mods in 3 different categories. You can double all of your stats, but you can't buy a barley bulb for 10,000 credits. The examples go on and on and on. This is why I think it should just be one modded gameplay category. And honestly, if they were to do that, I would just move over to it myself. And I think that seeing more content creators and personalities in the community actually live in the modded space would be a beneficial thing. I know plenty of people who only play modded difficulties these days, and I'm certain that that would be their new place to be from then on. The entire high-level and modded difficulty community would be in that space. So I think taking that stigma away from it, that it's sandbox or whatever, would help a lot. So to say that level or being able to get an advantage from mods doesn't matter is clearly against what the devs outlined in the original post, is that they clearly want to keep some level of progression balance, but clearly that's not working anymore, because I can just go get infinite money in 30 minutes from farming crassus detonators. The system doesn't work. So they can either attempt to tighten the chokehold on mods and just kick everything into sandbox, which would be correct per their original mission statement, or they could decriminalize these weird sandbox mods that really aren't even more extreme than some of the stuff we have in approved. That's my take, at least. Merge approved and sandbox together, and just any mods that are like, increase your level forever, just don't let those be published. That's all I can say. That, and I wanted to acknowledge before I wrapped up, because I almost forgot, that the high difficulty mod that's widely used by the modded difficulty community these days doesn't increase the payout of Hazard 6, Hazard 7, Starship Troopers, that kind of thing. So I use those mods as an example in the beginning because that was the meta and that was how things were for a really long time. And just the fact that it was never truly acknowledged, it was just because those mods stopped being updated that they went away, not because the issue was actually addressed. But I've been rambling on long enough. Once again, I understand that just because a mod has the ability to give a player an advantage doesn't mean it's being expressly used to cheat, but as some of the comments we've seen kind of reflect, some people are definitely using these mods in that way. Why do I care? Well, why does anyone care about anything? Because I'm invested in this game. But that about does it for my coverage of modding. I know this has been a lot of doom and gloom, but I'm very happy with modding in general with DRG. It enriches the game experience, it makes it easier for me to make content, and overall just makes the game more interesting for people that probably would have quit a long time ago. But I'm going to keep talking in circles all day about this. Overall, I want to extend a very positive sentiment to the modding community. I'm incredibly impressed with everything that you guys do. You're all very talented. Except if you're just doubling stats in Hex Editor. That's just weird as hell. If you'd like to join and become a YouTube member, get your name in the credits of every video along with some other perks, you can press the join button down below. If you'd like to catch me live, I stream over on Twitch. And if you'd like to come tell me that all mods are perfectly fair and balanced, you can find me and my community over on Discord. Much love, and as always, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.